Uh, that is very loud and obnoxious. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And I'm actually going to, uh, sorry, I'm just getting
Sure.
my
Yeah, I'm happy to start with an
screen
intro.
situated. Yep.
Sarah. Yeah, great. Yeah, so hello and welcome to our program. Are you looking for a 1 million or $100 million exit for your game-changing idea? The answer to that question could help shape your IP strategy. So today we've invited some pros to help us navigate the intellectual property pathway. I will moderate today's discussion. My name is Sarah Rogers. I'm a founder and director at the American Society of Pharmacovigilance, where we are seeking out new ideas and new technologies that could help improve medication safety and patient outcomes. In alignment with that goal, I also co-lead the Houston chapter of the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, which is a nonprofit global biomedical and healthcare innovation network. The SoPE community is comprised of all types of healthcare professionals, entrepreneurs, organizations, and investors. For today's program, we'll talk a little bit about the entrepreneurship journey, patenting your IP, and some of the tools and resources to help build your brand. So to kick it off, I'll pass it over to the other half of the leadership team here at Houston SoPE, Dr. Sarma Vela-Murray. He's a board certified internal medicine physician, the CEO and co-founder of Luminaire, and an active advisor at the Texas Medical Center's Innovation Institute, helping emerging companies in the biotechnology space.
Thank you. And all of that and a dollar will buy me coffee, like they say. So thanks, Sarah, for the intro. So uh, hi, everyone. For those who've not heard of my company, which is probably a lot of people on this call, we're based in the medical center. I'm a recovering physician, and I started the company 8 years ago because my friend's daughter ended up dying of septic shock in my ICU. And we build predictive analytic systems for hospitals to help with sepsis. We've also done things in the vaccine area, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. And the company is about 30 people today, and we sit in the Texas Medical Center at TMCX, which is where I am right now. So I'd like to give you a little bit of background on this one million or $100 million question and where that came up with. So about 4 years ago, I ran into two physician entrepreneurs because of what I do, which is entrepreneurship, and started a company. I advise some other companies in the healthcare space and some venture funds. Um, whether the advice I'm giving is good or bad, like remains to be seen yet, but I do give advice. And so I ran into these two physicians, and they had started a software company, and they had a great idea that solved a problem for their hospital with respect to some certain workflows that they had issues with. So great idea. These two guys, basically had money. They put some money, hired some developers, started writing software. They got their hospital to they talked them into running a pilot. They ran a pilot. The hospital liked it. They rolled the software out then system wide. And the reason I found them was I was actually a user of their product. The hospital basically made me use the software product that they built in order to do things in my day-to-day workflow. And I just got interested in meeting these guys. I was like, look, they're this is amazing. Like, this is the thing, right? Like, everyone talks about, you have a day job, you come up with an idea that solves a problem, you build a solution, it gets used, it gets adopted, and then it got adopted system wide in a hospital. That's a big deal. So I got to sit down and talk to them, and they said, yeah, we exited the company. And I said, that's amazing. Like, what was the exit like? And they said, well, we both got like some pretty neat administrative jobs in this hospital system, and we basically got all the money that we invested back. I said, wait a second. So you have a product that is producing return some serious results to the hospital and solving a problem that the hospital has. And they had by then, they had about 10 developers working in the company, and they had I mean, they were spending, I think it was like $100,000 a month by then on just keeping operations running. I said, and they basically got their money back. I said, wait, what is? what went wrong? And they basically said, well, the problem was we didn't really think about the IP ahead of time. We didn't really think about like what we were doing. We didn't think about what the exit looked like. And so I like to have this conversation with people up front when I talk to starting emerging companies in the space or people who are starting companies. The conversation always goes, before we do anything else, let's talk about IP. And this is the journey that I started 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I actually went to Alberto. This is pre Garage, like pre, single line of code written, pre Luminaire, before the company's name even existed. I had an idea. And I had some people tell me, hey, you should think about protecting your IP. And I didn't know anything about IP. And I thought IP meant patent. And so I say, fine, like, what do I do next? I guess find a lawyer. So through my friend network, I met Alberto, who you're going to hear from, and I'm going to shut up in about 3 minutes. I met Alberto, and I walk into his office, and the guy looks at me, and I tell him the idea, and he says, "Great idea. Like, what's the name of the company you represent?" I was like, "Company? What company? I don't know. I don't represent companies." He says, "I don't represent people. I represent companies. Go start a company." I was like, "Go start a company? Like, how do you what? Like, this is it's almost 9 years ago now. It's like, what do you mean start a company? How do So he introduces me to like a lawyer. We, start a company. He helps me file some IP. And Alberto, like, we have a patent now, correct? Before I misrepresent on like this national scale, you can unmute yourself. Maybe I don't have a patent. It's a
There you
bad
go.
way to tell
No,
me.
no, you
There
have
you
a
are.
you have a couple patents,
Okay,
and
good.
just as important, you have pending patent applications. So
So
your IP is kind of unlimited and undefined. Well, it's limited by what.
okay, so the point I was trying to make was the day I met Alberto was the day everything changed because I began to understand how IP works. And um, if people tell you software can't be patented or your idea cannot be patented, that's their opinion. And unless it's coming out of the mouth of someone who specializes in intellectual property law, uh, their opinion in a dollar will buy you a cup of coffee. So, bottom line, if you forget everything I said to you, what I'd like to say to you is we have an emerging company that has done a lot of things. We've helped over 2 million people in the last 6 to 8 months with software. And all of it started with basically this basic discussion on like what is IP, where does the IP reside, and what can we do to protect it. So with that, I'm going to hand over the baton to Alberto, or actually to Sarah, who's going to introduce Alberto.
Sure. Yeah. So that leads us to our next presenter, Alberto Amatong. He's a partner at Amatong McCoy and has experience and expertise in all aspects of intellectual property law, with emphasis on managing international intellectual property portfolios, including over 20 years of patent and trademark prosecution and enforcement, and representing clients in complex transactions involving technology assets. So, welcome, Alberto.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad to be here. I put on the suit, I clean my desk, and I even have pants on, my business suit pants on with me. So this is, I'm glad we're getting closer to normal. Sarma, thanks for the kind words. There was something you said that I'm going to put on my website, which was the day I met Alberto, everything changed. I've been trying to convince people that, so maybe I'll use that.
True story.
Um, I am I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 24, 25 years. I was an engineer before that. Um, uh, my title is sometimes IP attorney, intellectual property attorney, and also sometimes we call ourselves patent attorneys because patent law is a big part of IP as it concerns business, and it's particularly nuanced. So we're often recruited to address this space and also assist other attorneys on cases and on businesses. Um, Typically, well, okay, my roster of clients, I think you can divide, or a big part of my roster of clients are, or one part is established companies who already have an IP portfolio, and we help them uh, realize and build that IP portfolio and also enforce it. But we also have clients who are uh, or is a person or a group of persons, uh, i.e., that formed a company, and they have a business idea, and they come to us, or we're particularly uh, geared to help them because in these types of endeavors, there is technology or innovation that is central to their business model. So oftentimes we're one of the first lawyers that they, or attorneys and consultants that they speak with. Um, and one of the first things I tell them is, again, this is early in their, um, you know, in their growth. They've been recently established. One of the first things I tell them is the idea may be great, but one of the things, or the thing that you need to not lose sight of, is you need to determine the commercial viability of that idea, or more generally, that business idea, because that is what governs everything. Your decisions on IP should not be should be considered in terms of, in the context of your business objectives always. Let me I'm going to put on or try to.
Are you able to share your screen?
Yeah, but okay, trying to find my, what I want to share.
I have a copy if you'd like me to.
Yeah, could you, I don't know why it's not coming up. Well, wait, hold on. Yeah, can you put it up?
Sure, absolutely. Let me just pull it up here. Sorry, folks. Give me a second.
Apologize.
Okay.
Come up.
You're sharing your intellectual property via
Oh,
sharing your email. Almost there. I'm just pulling it up. It's just spooling in my PowerPoint. Thirty seconds away. And here it goes. I'm gonna put this in presenter view.
oh, here it is. I got it. Came on.
Too late. Oh, you have it? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. You see that?
Yep, we're on the questions page.
Okay. Well, we'll go. I'm done.
We promise you this is. I don't think you're not doing 22 slides because, like as promised, we're
Oh,
going to.
no. Yeah, I'm gonna. All right. There we go. You see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We did
That's
get
funny.
license for these cartoons, FYI, because they're somebody else's intellectual property. Okay. The first thing I'd like to offer to you is uh, a definition for intellectual property. This is somewhat legalese, but really, I think this is what entrepreneurs, business people need to understand. IP rights is not a tangible thing. It is an intangible. My definition is, or a definition I offer is, IP rights represent, or more uh, more accurately, present a legal risk to third parties. It is a right to exclude others from doing something. You have the exclusive right to do that. So you may come up with a product, right? And that product embodies certain, well, in the case of patents, ideas or concepts, excuse me. Uh, the IP rights on that product, on that idea, that design, uh, allows you to stop others from doing the same thing. Okay, and there are different types of IP. The big four, I'd like to say, are patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. Uh, Patents, in many cases, have the most teeth. They're more they're easier to enforce and are more of a threat and harder to get around. Uh, in many cases, a lot of it depends, of course, on the patent and the claims in the patent, but it's harder to get around uh, for third parties, which is, again, that's who have the risk, and those are the target of your IP. All right, real quick, um, patents. Patents are granted by the PTO, by governments in the U.S. and every other jurisdictions in the world. You have to apply for them, and it gives you exclusive right to use, make, sell, offer for sale, or import an invention. Um, whereas trademark, it's a word, phrase, symbol, or design that distinguishes the source of the product. So it distinguishes, let's say, the company that makes the product um, from other companies. Without it, you're not able to attach the goodwill that the product or the company develops because they've got, let's say, a great product. So it is kind of the conduit for that. And once that trademark or once there's goodwill attached to it, uh, third parties may want to piggyback off of it or off it. So the trademark right allows you to prevent those third parties from also enjoying or exploiting what you've done for your company and for your product or service. Trademarks, unlike patents, you actual use is critical or principal to trademark right. Um, you actually develop or gain trademark rights upon use. The federal trademark registration and the federal trademark, what that gives you is it gives you well, what the biggest thing is that it applies throughout the 50 states, and it also allows you to have some enforcement means, particularly in court, that you may not have or may not be as effective with what we call a common law trademark.
So I just want to chime in at this point and say, like, all of these things that Alberto is telling you right now is like literally like verbatim everything he told me, word almost word for word, like, almost a decade ago. And this is, I would be taking notes right now.
And Sarma, I think one thing that I think we discussed early on, but should is something that entrepreneurs should begin to think about right when they have an idea is having an understanding what IP is and just be on the lookout for it. That may be the first step. It's, yeah, you've got a great idea, but also begin to look at it from the lens of IP. What is it about that idea, that business idea, that other people might want to take for themselves? And what IP does, it presents a cost for your third parties to try to do it on their own. You already have, there are other things that you may have that do the same thing. One is your expertise and head start, obviously. head start in developing the idea or maybe penetrating the market. Uh, IP enhances that. It gives you more, more layer of protection. And again, what third parties, how you present it to third parties and how they perceive it is that is the cost for them to try to go around you. In a legal sense, that cost includes potential, damages in court. Um, but if you've got good IP and you got good product, what you want third parties to conclude is it's easier to go away and not compete with you, not duplicate your product, or license from you, or join you. Because a lot of times these third parties are not competitors; they're potential partners, potential investors. And if you present an idea, a great idea to somebody, um, they're going to think or consider, well, why do I need you? An answer to that maybe is because you're the expert and you've got a head start. But sometimes, or oftentimes, or you want more than that, because they may think that, well, I can find somebody else to do this. I find another engineer. Well, what IP does is it takes away that option from them, or at least make that option more cost restrictive or more costly. All right, quickly. The other two IP rights are copyrights. These are more artistic works, although there's copyrights in software. These are specifically defined by statute. As with trademarks, copyrights are born on inception. You don't need to do anything else. The reason why we get copyrights is that, copyright registration is that gives you legal means of enforcement, particularly litigation. In fact, we as attorneys or as IP attorneys, once we have an IP dispute that involves a third party encroaching on the copyright of someone, if they haven't done so already, we file a copyright application. And then we send somebody a copy of that copyright application, because that gives the copyright protection teeth that provides or presents potential damages that they may have to cough up if they continue to infringe. And then the other thing is trade secrets. Any company that's involved in or has a head start in developing an idea or a way to implement that idea or a business, they're going to have trade secrets. And I will tell you that, again, we're talking about exit strategies. I will tell you that in a lot of cases, patents may be the big thing and the most attractive thing, but it's usually, especially large companies who are taking over not only the endeavor, but every asset that this, the patentee's business has. They want everything, and it's great to throw in trade secrets. Trade secrets often, when I talk about the head start and your expertise, from a buyer's or purchaser standpoint, that they can't always get that unless they hire you on, as a consultant or make you get you to agree to be a consultant for 2 or 3 years. But they certainly can get all the trade secrets, which is everything that company knows or develop that is helpful in the business and provides that business or potential business a competitive advantage. The thing about trade secrets is obviously you got to keep a secret. Once it becomes publicly known, it's not something that you can actually transfer and get paid for.
So Albert, I want to interrupt you there for a second. So just one is you have about 7 minutes left. And the second
okay.
thing is, this is something that he's like drilled into my head about trade secrets. And Alberto, like just for the So the sort of people who are on this call who are, have an idea, maybe for filed a patent, maybe have some patents, and think about starting a company or thinking about, like, how to commercialize that idea. You know, brief one liner. What can I do to protect my trade secret? What's the easy button?
Say the last part, I'm sorry.
What's the easy button
Or
to start with, just as an entrepreneur, right? Like, I'm trying, I'm walking around, I'm talking about my idea to a few people, and I may or may not have filed any sort of like a patent on it yet. I'm in like early discovery phases. What can I do to
well,
protect myself?
one thing is secrecy, confidentiality. That applies to patents and that applies to trade secrets. And then obviously with other IP or other ideas, you don't want others to get hold of it and try to get ahead of
So
you.
sign an NDA or something like that.
If you need, well, one, try to keep it secret,
Right.
right? But that's not always true if you're trying to develop a business and you need contractors, you're talking to potential partners, investors. In those cases, yes, you got to try to get an NDA in place, or at least uh, make every communication confidential. Uh, one of the tips, I guess, or rules is that you will lose your trade secret, your IP, if it loses secrecy. Also, with patents, if they're publicly disclosed in in the rest of the world, other than the U.S., it loses novelty. It loses you lose your ability to get a patent on it, and it's in the public domain. You can't get a patent. In the U.S., you actually have a 1 year grace period. So when you publicly disclose, the clock starts. And this is where provisional applications may help, because at certain early stages, you may be unsure as to the business or commercial viability of the idea or the business endeavor, or you may not have fully developed a prototype or the tangible thing that embodies the patent. Filing a provisional application, which some people may refer to as an informal application. Uh, it preserves one, it allows you to disclose it because now you filed. That filing uh, allows you to get around the rule of novelty, which is you got to file before it's publicly disclosed. Uh, and even when you file the provisional, you can keep that secret for a year, and then at year's time is when you have to file foreign or international applications, and also a formal or utility application in the U.S.
Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna see. I know we're running out of time. What can IP do for you? Um, Again, it's a legal right to exclude others from use, which when you think about it, that's what when you're starting up a company and you're trying to build value, that's what you want to to present out there, is that only you can do that, or others can, and that they have to go through you. What it does is increase third parties' risk and cost, as we said. You want you want that IP to or third parties to look at that IP and either go away or come to you through a license or through partnership. Um, Another thing about patents, the U.S. and the rest and most of the rest of the world is a first to file system, meaning that the first person to file an application in their invention gets the patent. If you if you came up with the invention, maybe even wrote it down or told or talked to your business partners about it and even worked on it. If you don't file before somebody else, even if that somebody else came up with the invention afterwards on their own independently, if they file first, they get the patent. You don't. That's another reason why you need to be thinking early about filing a provisional or a patent application or going to an attorney to talk about it. Because, oftentimes you don't want to file too early, but you're balancing that with the threat of or the risk of somebody does it first. And also, it's not always somebody files an application first. If somebody discloses a paper or send or puts out a product that embodies your invention, that cuts off the novelty. Now it's publicly known, and it was publicly known before you filed. So you lose novelty and you can't get a patent. What are the risks to third parties? And let me tell you, most patent disputes don't go to litigation. They're settled. And most patent disputes that start to litigation don't go to trial. They're settled. What I think it's because unlike a lot of legal disputes, patent disputes are economic or financial or economic in nature. There is reasonable business minds are the players that are considering this. So what I think that is happening is there's a economic formula that provides the common ground where the two parties in dispute are, will agree to. And it's a financial calculation. How much will, you may want to settle something, but then, or you may want to fight something, but you're only going to put in so much money. There's a certain point where, I could, that money could be put into, I'll take that, instead of fighting a patent infringement suit, I can put that into the settlement or offer for settlement. So anyway, a third party's risk is one, an injunction. So if they've started to build factories to make something, they lose their investment if a patent infringement suit or the threat of it is presented to them. The other thing is damages. If somebody succeeds, or at least when they threaten them, they're going to be asking for the profits, either lost profits that they could have had, or what those guys would have had to pay in reasonable royalties. Also, a driving force is the cost of litigation. Patent litigation is very high. And then something that I found out is, because I've filed some lawsuits, and oftentimes with larger companies. Larger companies don't like to be, be called out in the papers for patent infringement. It's just, there's a bad guy connotation to it. I don't know how many times, I've talked to the other side's attorney, and they'll say, without me asking, my client, they're good guys. Like, but they always say that, like, they're good guys. The thing about patent and patent infringement is, unlike some of the other IP infringement, is that you can be an innocent, you don't have to know of somebody else's patent to be infringing. It's unlike a lot of other infringement. It could be relevant. You could actually get, your damages could actually be tripled if you did it willfully or willingly. But that is something to consider early on if you're going to, I have companies that in the consumer products industry, and when they come up with a product, they may ship out millions and millions of these, and so that each one of those widgets could be an infringement. So that the cost and the risk could be very high. Plus, they may have partners along the line, distributors, retailers, who are also infringing. So they will do oftentimes they'll ask for a freedom to operate opinion, right? Which is actually, very costly, because you got to do, there's a lot of attorney time involved. And that opinion basically gives them some assurance that, okay, we did our due diligence and we don't think you're infringing. Also in court, it minimizes their willful infringement risk, which could, if they lose in patent infringement, could uh, could magnify their risk. Um, Now, for the entrepreneur, I think I have this. We probably won't get to it, but I have a note here that says, "Look, there's always a risk of infringement, but don't let that hinder you." And one of the things to remember is that if you're only thinking about an idea or developing, you haven't even sold anything, your risk is basically nothing other than what you put into it. If you end up infringing somebody else's patent, but you haven't put out any product, you don't really have any damages for patent infringement. But you may have to, the effort and the resources you put in, the fact, if you build factories, you may lose the return or your potential return on those. Okay, I think I'm going over. Um,
Yeah.
Sarah, so
Yeah, great. If you want to stop sharing your screen, thanks so much, Alberto, for that great foundation. I feel really knowledgeable now after hearing your presentation. So our next presenter is Gracie Padron Steinley. She's the founder and creative director of Padron Design Studio, and she has more than a decade of experience as a graphic and user interface designer, digital artist, and branding consultant. Her studio specializes in nonprofit startups and small businesses. And of course, her relationship with Sarma goes back, being towards the beginning of Luminaire as well, Sarma.
Almost to the beginning of Luminar. So I'm using a cool background that Gracie's team, I think maybe Katian who's on this call, is designed for us. So cool background. So no, Gracie actually, the reason she's in on this call and the reason I thought of inviting her was I have done every version of building a website wrong. Thankfully, we got the branding part of our company right in the very, very early days because I'm a nerd and like design and branding is super important to us. And so, shortly after going down the IP route, the next thing we did was get a really good designer to build us a brand and some brand colors. And this is not, again, going back to the, do you want $1 million exit or $100 million exit? And we had decided way back that it wasn't the size of the exit that we were bothered about. We decided we were building a company that was going to stop the number one cause of death in US hospitals, sepsis, and we were going to get 4,500 hospitals on our platform. And 8 years ago, folks said that's never going to happen. You'll never get 100% of the market. And my response to people, especially if you're an entrepreneur, your response to people who tell you you can't do something is like, tell me again, and then come back to me in 6 months, and I'll tell you what I did about it. And anyway, so we got the branding part right, but we got everything else wrong. I tried to hire people to build us a website as full-time employees. We hired contractors. We hired design agencies. At one point of time, we got like I think about like 6 months worth of free design work from one of the largest brands in the world that does design for very large pharma companies through an accelerator. And 6 months in, we still were no better than we started off. And then ran into Gracie, and within I think it was a period of like 14 days. Like she built us a version, what I call now as like, version one of our website, which when we hired her, we said, hey, Gracie, all you got to do is build a website, will take us to $1 million. And then when we get to $1 million in revenue, we'll build the next one and so on. So she got us to our first waypoint, then she built us another website. And so web branding and design is Gracie's sort of skill set for her company, and the work she's done with us has impacted the lives of, like I said, north of 1 million people through our COVID work. People have hit our website and signed up for our products. And so this is the second part that entrepreneurs got to think about, is not just have a protected my IP, but that's great. But now you got to build yourself a company and a brand that will scale with you. And I've seen a bunch of companies that they get to like the $1 million mark in revenue, and then they go, oh shoot, like, we haven't figured out our branding strategy and we haven't figured out. And so you don't need to spend a whole bunch of cash on this. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Gracie, who's going to talk about what she does best. So I'm going to mute myself now.
Thanks, Arma. I'll say this. I think when it was just about sepsis, you had a good brand going, and you were very specific about this sort of like space motif and shining light on data. So you had thought all of that through. But I think if you didn't have that website sort of cleaned up before you started pivoting towards in the time of COVID, I don't think you would have been so successful with government agencies, because they would have seen like a Wix website and been like, what is this? So
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
was an
I agree. I agree. It
growth.
stood the test of the market with Gracie. Like we've had, you know, all of our deals that we landed basically were inbound through relationships, and they got all their information from our website before we got on a sales call. And at one point of time, we were closing deals by text message because they just said, "Yeah, we went to your website, we looked at everything, we talked to a customer. This is great. Like, sign us up." So, Gracie, you're going to tell us about how you're going to do this for all the people who are on this call today.
I don't think that's possible, but I will share my screen so you can see a little bit about what we do. Hopefully, oh, okay, hope you can see that well. Let's see. What is branding? And here's your standard encyclopedia, Wikipedia version of what branding is. But I like to say that branding really, here in Texas, you think of cow brands that were done since, I don't know, early Egyptian times. That was just, let's put our signal unique to our ranch on this cow. And then if it gets stolen, we can say that's my cow, right? Very basic. Now in modern times, it's not as simple as, is a cow jumping the fence? Now it's a matter of, has someone taken my cow, scraped it off, and drawn some more things on it and saying now that's their brand, right? Or establishing the reputation of the brand. For example, keeping to the cow metaphor, is this Kobe beef or is it Chuck's roast from the store? The brand really speaks for itself. If you're a startup and you're just at your table thinking about, well, I have this idea, how can I make it grow? Is this really the time to be thinking about your brand? Well, sort of, right? Because branding is not just like a visual representation, branding is your reputation. So even in the idea stage, you need to be making decisions about how you are going to differentiate yourself in the market, and not just visually, but in general, in positioning yourself as a differentiator, that sort of thing. So then into business plan, well, okay, let me work it out. How can I draw it up in such a way that anyone sees this business plan? It's like, I understand what you do. I understand what you want to accomplish. Done, sold, let's go. And then in development is where you kind of get into, well, do we want a logo? How do we go about it? Do we do it ourselves? Do we hire someone out? Do we go into a big agency? What's going on? And then there's trademark, which is where Alberto kind of comes in. So you have to legally submit your logo to be trademarked. Now, you create it originally, and I'll go into what an original logo actually is, because there's many people who post things out there that are not actually something that they created themselves. So this is very important because small business owners are frequently fooled by designers.
I think what Grace is trying to tell you is, I went on Canva and made a logo and sent it to her, and she said, don't do that.
Definitely don't do. We'll come back to that. We'll set up a meeting next week. That's not okay. All right. So then human capital. All right. You're hiring, have your, to have your logo on your shirt. What's happening there? If you have a salesperson going out to conferences, do they have a branded tablecloth? Do they have, signage behind, that sort of thing? And of course, launch and marketing. People don't even think about branding until they get to launch and marketing. But once you're there, let's say you are successful by some miracle, you just have this product that is so good that even though you look like you were built out of a garage, you still have cornered the market, you're doing fantastically. Well, what if they try and buy you? Do you look good enough to buy? If they buy, or are they going to have to like completely strip your branding and start over? I mean, there's to think about at every step. But here's how to start. So typically we do what's called a brand audit. And even though we are in a very colorful, fun industry, we start by gathering data. Like everybody else in medical and anything, scientific process, how exactly do you fit in? What does everybody look like? This is what we think we want to do. Does the data back it up? It's the same everywhere. Here you're seeing parts of a brand audit created for William Harris Lee and Company, which is the largest string manufacturer and distributor in the US, and they're based out of Chicago. So we had to build a brand around Chicago itself, and also incorporating the colors, elements, and industry standards for the string manufacturing industry, even though they are the leader. They've rested on their laurels so long that they had to do a brand audit and rebrand slowly in order to continue to be at the top and not get sort of usurped from the throne. So that's an example of a good place to start, as well as a place to go if you have been in business for a long time. Some basic examples you've seen of branding, right? It's in healthcare, it's everywhere. In fact, I think healthcare has the most branding out of everyone everywhere. And it can be from the name of how did they come up with that? It's like, well, it's so random and weird that it's catchy enough to remember, but random and weird enough to trademark and patent and all of that. So you see that a lot, but here I've selected just a few. So you can see that even within this industry, they all have different fonts, they all have different colors, some have a logo, some don't, most have the registered or trademark sign associated with them because they had to register their trademark to prevent infringement. But then you see examples like this. So where here they're intentionally different and somewhat human and professional and all of that because they want to instill trust and the idea that they are a large overarching, we will dominate the world company. Here you have something that's feeding America, right? All of these are different food banks throughout the West, from Arizona, California, Texas, Nebraska, LA. They all follow more or less a cohesive color scheme because most of them get some level of funding from Feeding America. So if you are part of an overarching, I'm sure many brands coming out of TMXC or TMCX will associated with it once they get big enough. But yeah, so color and imagery, there are certain standards for industry, and that's sort of what we need to identify when we're looking at starting a new company or building it from there. What not to do. All right, so you more or less know I either need a design firm, I need a freelancer. My cousin Jimmy knows how to do websites on Squarespace or Wix. I'm going to hire him, right? Or you can do it yourself, and I have some examples of platforms that you can do it yourself. Even though I've been at this for a very long time, I'm a second generation graphic designer, so it's very, very important to me to have all of my beautiful Adobe programs and Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator and all of that. I completely understand that from a budget standpoint, there are people that want to do it themselves. So we do actually create templates for them in something like Canva, so that it's at the very least a professional that has thought it through, and then they can create the assets based off of that. We don't like to do it, but we occasionally have to do it, especially if we work with nonprofits who just can't afford to keep us on retainer all the time, right? So the biggest red flags are you hire someone online and they say, hey, I need $1,000 up front and then you'll get your project in a week, you know, that sort of thing. No, usually you'll have either they'll bill you at the end of the project, they make you sign all the contracts, they bill you at the end of the project, or we typically like to do for logo and brand design some sort of deposit and then final payment before we send over the final files, which can be everywhere from a PNG to an EPS. So if all you have is a 100 pixel by 100 pixel PNG, you did it wrong, start over, or they did it wrong, and you need to get your money back. But a lot of the time as well, if you get a freelancer and they're just like, oh, okay, so you're inventing something and the name of the company is Monarch, I'm gonna stick a butterfly on it. Okay, cool, great. But they give you no input, they don't look at the industry, it's really generic. Typically what ends up happening is they literally Google through vector sites. or Shutterstock or Vector Stock or any kind of stock website where they can download sample logos. I feel like there is a place in the world for stock logos because actual creatives can use it and then modify it, make something unique. But you cannot simply download a stock logo, trademark it as your own. Anyone can download that stock and it can be used by a million people. So that's why obviously you want to get someone who's creating something original for you. And products like Canva are nice because you do it yourself. But remember, if you're all using the exact same tools that are extremely limited, they're not professional tools, there's always the risk that somebody else is going to have the exact same thing. So and then there's always, if it's too good to be true, you get what you pay for. And I'm not going to explain that one. In terms of pricing, if you're doing it yourself, it's probably free. Fiverr or other cheap services, there's a lot of places that offer $5 logos. You get what you pay for. Oftentimes they'll say like, oh, maybe it's like $5 an hour, or $20 an hour is really considered cheap in our industry. And then at the end, it might end up being like $400 for the whole project and you get a logo out of it. And if it is genuinely something original and you do a reverse image search on Google and 100 things don't pop up with the exact same shape, then you know you're in pretty good business. Certainly things will pop up. If you do try and trademark it, there's gonna be a search, you're gonna be in trouble. So I would avoid this for the obvious reasons. If you have a qualified freelancer, everyone on my team at one point has freelanced where maybe we were part of another agency and we said, well, no, I can do that for you myself as a designer working inside of an agency, but not with the agency, or your cousin Jimmy, right? Maybe he is a graphic designer. They can charge anywhere around $40, $45, or maybe $1,000 for the whole project. That's a good average rate. It really depends on the individual. If you're working with someone out of Pentagram, they're going to charge you $1,000 an hour. But anyway, a small agency like us, because we work with nonprofits, we sort of capped our rates to a certain degree. So we're between 100, 150 an hour, which is more than a freelancer, but less than some of the larger agencies. And we specifically do that so we don't price ourselves out of our market, which is nonprofits, startups. They're usually, they're not going to pay $300 an hour, $500 an hour for our time or work, even though, as Sarma illustrated, we often do better work than some of the bigger agencies. But we intentionally do it so we can continue to work with really wonderful people who are saving lives. And I can tell you more about my amazing clients, but let's keep talking. And then a bigger agency will most likely charge you 150 plus. It can go as high as they want to create a package for you. And instead of charging per hour, they'll put it together in a massive bulk project rate. So it might be like a $50,000 project. But at the end of it, there's nobody there to help you manage all of the items. So branding is kind of a process that it's not just your logo, it's not just your research and figuring out your fonts and things like that. It is part of a larger thing where you have to be consistently all the time adding new things to it. What do my social media look like, right? Every single day is a new social media post, or however long it takes to post, or every email. Every single touch point over time needs to be consistent to the original brand, or you are diluting yourself and your value goes down. So it's not just, here's a lump sum, give me a really nice logo and a brand style guide and things like that. It's more of, okay, after we've done that, how can we continue to hire you to manage all of our stuff over time? So that's where we've really cornered the market with a lot of nonprofits, is they don't want to pay for an in-house graphic designer or marketing team, but they also don't want to give this massive lump sum to these agencies, get a product that's meh, because they don't really, the good ones spend the time, but most of the time working with my nonprofits get shafted all the time. Then they don't have anybody in-house to continue using the templates that were created by the larger agency. So with our slightly lower hourly rate, they keep hiring us and hiring us and hiring us. These are just some free online or very cheap online business plan builders. I'll be honest, I've been in business for a bit and I've never had to use one, because this is what our business plan looks like. And it actually continues upwards, and includes our client acquisition strategy and our growth plan as well. So we're extremely visual, but if you're trying to get funding, obviously get a really nice
So,
business plan.
I want to chime in here, Gracie, on the business plan thing is like, oh, Amber Alert, excuse me. Don't knock the business plan idea because I actually went to sba.gov and like was like how to write a business plan and kind of filled out the form and did that and created a 52-page business
Yeah.
plan before there was a business. And it's a very good thing for you to go through as an entrepreneur, not to share externally, but just if you're serious about starting a company, you got to be able to spend 6 hours sitting in the same place thinking about the same thing without being ADD about it and write it down. And it might just be for you to decide, I don't want to do this.
Absolutely, and I'm all for it. I'm just saying, when you're a designer, it's a visual plan.
Right, that's a great idea
It's
for a
not
business
written
plan.
out. I mean, it is written out, but it's spread out over time in a very convoluted way. My team gets a kick out of it whenever I pull it up. And I'm like, are we at this point here? Like, how do we expand here? Can we grow this section? And, so we like to think of our business plan as kind of a living document more than that. But yes, 100%, if you're brand new and starting out and not in the graphics field, do a business plan. And those are great resources. Now, this is unfortunately the industry standard for how to get in trouble, which is Fiverr.com, where you'll get people who pay $400 and end up with a product that they hate, dealing with people that make it more difficult. Or you can do Canva, do it yourself. Don't do it, Sarma, but you can do it yourself. And then you run the risk of, can I actually trademark this? Because maybe I used bits that were, stock. We manually just draw things, right? So it's a matter of, can you actually trademark this? Probably not. And if you can't trademark this in the future, do you really want to spend time or money on it? Now, I do think that services like Canva and other tools for people who don't have the programs to at the very least sketch out an idea. I do think it's a great resource for you to plan out your idea, take it to somebody who knows what they're doing, and then make sure that it can scale with your growth. But it's a great brainstorming tool, certainly. All right, so this is the world's simplest brand style guide. Most brand guides, when you come up with your colors and your numbers and all of that fun stuff, is a full document with usage examples, templates. I mean, it could be a 200-page document even. We've never built one that big. I think our biggest is like 50, 60 pages, but it's important to have, at the very least, these three things, which is a unique color palette, your typefaces, which we are really careful about making sure that they're web safe typefaces, and then just some basic logos that exist as a single color, full color, or reversed out, which is really important.
And this might sound excessive, but again, the reason we have Alberto and Gracie on the call is this works. Like this, if you're serious about starting a company or commercializing your idea, these are the things that after you get it off the ground, like even just a little bit, these are the things that suddenly become assets for you. Like when you're making a presentation or you're making a website, and these are things that it's makes the person looking at your company so much more comfortable, and people are never able to enunciate why some startups look good and why they feel good compared to other startups that both might have great products, but sometimes this branding piece that Grace is talking about is kind of super important. So
it certainly helps
to stop interrupting you, but this is like
you're fine. So in the case, we use the Board Wizards example because they had another logo that was similar. Board Wizards was started by physicians, specifically podiatrists, and they wanted to find, they came up with a special technology that allows podiatrists to interact with sample questions, test examples, things like that, and pass their boards easier. And it comes with a guarantee that if you don't pass it the first time, you can continue to use the product multiple times until you pass. Because of this, they sort of realized, well, we don't have anything like this right now. Let's get it out there. They've cornered over 75% of the market. While other people are onto it. So they came to us having built this wizard persona for years and put it on all of their products and things like that. And they had very interesting, like this green was their original green. We pivoted some of their other colors. The green was their original green, which is just an odd color in medicine, right? But very youthful and unique. So when we did our brand audit with them, we identified all of the things that really made them unique. And rather than erase all of it and be like, let's get rid of the wizards and let's make them really professional and clean and have no personality, but at least appear to be just like the Aetnas and the United Healthcares of the world, you know, basic, easy to use, nothing fancy. If we had done that, they wouldn't have been in a good position to counter imitators who were trying to come up with the same product, but had no personality of their own. I mean, if anyone had attempted to even use a wizard, which is such an odd thing, I have no idea where they came up with it. If they had attempted to use a wizard in anything, it would have been an obvious fake, right? So they had anyone trying to imitate them without infringing on what they had to do a diluted, less interesting form that just would never be successful, really, because it lacks personality. Why wouldn't you go with something that has the history, the personality, and the cajillion testimonials saying it works versus this new bland thing that was created with clearly templates, and you know, the logo is just the name of the company, nothing interesting about it. So it really helped protect them. And even when they were filing protection lawsuits, all they had to do was make themselves a little bit more professional. That's where we came in, but we did not erase their identity in any form. And that is where I stop you for questions. I hope I didn't go too far over.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Gracie. So yeah, I think kind of a preface for the conversation we're having today is that we have these big problems in healthcare, and there are solutions, but oftentimes they're shelved because the costs of implementing them are too high. And I think, you know, you all have really relayed a lot of important considerations in this other path to monetizing a product, and that's through intellectual property. So, you know, Sarma, you're situated there in the TMC's accelerator, you're advising these emerging companies in biotech. What kinds of trends are you seeing in biotech startups? And you may be on mute, just to let you know.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was trying to get rid of my nice video filter that that Gracie has so kindly made for us. But it's a great question. So when you talk about trends um, in the space, it's really interesting. Like, so I've been in this area for like about a decade, and we started working on a cloud-based solution for healthcare before healthcare cloud existed. So we're, you know, we were like in a garage talking about like, oh, we're going to like build a cloud-based tool that will interface with the medical record system through some means or format that will, you know, work for people. And people are going, cloud in healthcare, that doesn't exist. Nobody's going to ever allow like patient data to live on a cloud. What do you mean interface with the medical record system? Like, no medical record system is going to allow you to interface. And, you know, fast forward 10 years, we were too stupid to quit. So we basically just kept going, and now suddenly there's healthcare cloud, and everybody has healthcare cloud, and everybody has, you know, interfaces to the medical record system. Those are not the things that, you know. So what we're seeing is, and specifically, if your question is with respect to trends with the type of company, is that the way to look at it? I guess
you can take the, you know, yeah, the type of company. You can take the question whichever direction you want. Maybe related to the changing healthcare landscape, perhaps.
Yeah. So what we're seeing happen is the types of companies that are really making it frequently are, there's two types. One are the spin-offs from large companies, like, you know, the GE Health of the world, or the you know, pick your favorite like brand. what they've figured out is it's so much more efficient to innovate in a small group that they'll actually fire, and you can Google this, G's done this successfully. They'll fire the top four performers and basically say, you're gonna have a job starting tomorrow. What you got yourself is a company. We'll fund you. You get 50% share in this new company, and we'll fund you for the next like 36 months to do R&D on this idea. And then they like basically spin the company back into the company. And so that's one type of company we've seen, and these are enormously successful, mostly because they have the backing of this multi-billion-dollar corporation. And then the other type of companies that like we're beginning to see are like TMCX has a biodesign program. So they take someone in the healthcare field, an engineer, sometimes a designer, a business person, and they'll put them together, complete strangers. They'll park them in a hospital or in hospitals and say, hey, you guys go figure it out and see what's cool to invent. And there's a whole bunch of successful companies that have come out of that. And then finally, my favorite category that we're seeing is like people who go to work and see a problem or have a PhD on something or the other, and they basically say, I believe in this, I'm going to commercialize, because if I don't commercialize, then no one gets it.
Yeah. How about you, Gracie? I know you work with a lot of startups in healthcare and different nonprofits in the space. Are you seeing any trends coming to you and needing some Brandon?
Yeah, it seems like wearable tech is, and just sensors in general seems to be the direction. A lot of, we walk around with the phone all day. So how can we use the phone to give us health data, right? Like, how can it read just from your eyes? How's your brain doing? Now people are going into virtual reality. How can virtual reality help us? If it's things we wear that's on our bodies, how can we create custom, rather than dealing with data on people of a certain demographic using scientific info from studies done in the 1600s on like women's biology, right? That was on like French milkmaids. It's like, oh yeah, no, women stop being reproductively viable after like 20. It's, oh, that's not right? But it gets listed on so many studies nowadays. And when you look at the reason why, it's just this general consensus based on outdated data, where I'm seeing a lot of tech companies trying to break away with a lot of barriers, also with race and gender and these expectations, and trying to get more customized data for demographics that have been largely underserved. So that seems to be like a great healthcare equalizer through tech.
Yeah, and Alberta, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges entrepreneurs come across as they translate an idea into a patent?
Well, I think there are several, if not many, potential mistakes they make. But one comment I have as far as entrepreneurs in the healthcare field, I think it's it's commitment and timing. I mean, this isn't really an IP thing or a legal thing, but it's as I think I've kind of touched on a couple of times. There is timing involved in not only commercializing but realizing and perfecting what IP you might have, and sometimes that timing doesn't really fit into say some entrepreneurs who are maybe not sure or have have a full-time job. And what I've seen in healthcare is I'll talk to someone and then not talk to them again for a year, sometimes a year and a half. And, there are things that can happen. One is their idea, may not be commercially relevant, but let's just say it is. Well, somebody else may have actually come out with it and now they can't patent it. Or they may have publicly disclosed it and they can't patent it or get patents on it. So, yeah, I think it's, and, again, I don't know, obviously everybody, have their own constraints, but I think that's one of the the issues. And it's not so much, hey, you got to jump into this, but you need to realize that there's an alignment of the IP process that you need to recognize that should be, should be attached to the commercial development process. And then
Yeah.
the other challenge, and I think Sarma can appreciate this, just very specific, is documentation. IP is intangible. If it's in your mind, it's very hard to prove that you came up with it before. Again, timing is important. And a lot of times it's who's the earliest, or, you pin. A lot of litigation is dates. Emails show dates. So anyway, IP being intangible, you need to provide more than, hey, I came up with, I was thinking about that. Documenting it is, seems very simplistic, but that enhances many parts of the process. One, ownership, earlier possession, and even if you're gonna consult with a patent attorney, they're gonna ask you hey, what's your idea? On the first meeting, 80% of them will tell me what it is, and I'm not that smart. I can pretend, but I'll only capture 30. But really, if you wrote it down, then you're meeting some of the legal requirements, which is now you have evidence of that you came up with at a certain date. But also that's what patent attorneys are going to use as a starting point for a patent application. And then also, I think Sarma can probably attest it, that documentation is going to serve you for, if you're providing presentations to these, you should document your idea. And sometimes, I recognize that it's difficult for some people at the earliest stages to do. Now,
Yeah,
Sarma's very good about documenting.
He's making fun of me. I hate documenting. It's like you have to sit in one place long enough to write things down. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, they say. So just as a kind of a follow-up question, Alberto, can you give us an example of a time when someone came in with an idea, they patented it, and they had a successful exit? What did they do right? Are there any kind of pro tips you could offer?
Well, again, a lot of my clients are have been established businesses, or oil and gas companies. So they've got an IP portfolio, they've got an IP program. So they don't really have exit strategies, although they keep open the option of, and I think I got an email, option of when they're creating technology or IP, they're also considering the option of licensing that. So that, in a way, that's kind of a exit strategy, and a lot of their IP strategy is geared to that. I have a client that, okay, we'll file provisionals, we'll file patent applications, and the idea is to extend your ability to obtain a patent on an idea. And you do, again, there's timing involved. If you don't do certain things certain time, like for example, file an international application or file in Europe or Japan and those countries. Now those can be very costly, and also, but there's deadlines. So there are ways in the patent prosecution strategy where you're extending that, so that you don't have to decide to put in $100,000 into filing in 20 countries today. We can extend that to 31, 32 months. But another, I guess, example of exit strategy that isn't the 1 million, but it's kind of in between. I had a client who did exit, and he exited, his invention was was a certain type of, or a new type of ignition system. I think it was we call Corona ignition system. And I think I'd said before, you got to determine the commercial viability early on. That's the key. That is the reason why you're even in the patenting process. He did that because he knew that, at least at that time, there were emission standards that were going to come into effect, particularly in Europe. I tell you, those don't apply now because this is before EVs. But anyway, he knew he had an idea, but he also knew that in order for the certain auto manufacturers and suppliers or OEMs to be interested in it, he had to also build a prototype, get some test data, get a proof of concept. So he aligned that. That required more funding and also some partners. He quit his job, set up a shop, had some third-party testing. So I think that's an exit strategy where he didn't have a product out there that was proven to be successful and marketable because he sold 100,000. He wasn't ever going to be able to do that because that was going to require more resources than he had, and also more R&D resources. But he had to get it to a point where he had some proof of concept along with IP that got R&D departments ammunition to go to their CEOs and say, hey, this is one possible solution to our emissions problem.
And he exited north of 1 million.
Yeah, he spends most of his time on a boat. He bought
Figured.
that property.
So, which is the point we're trying to make.
Thing, Sarma, is this guy calls me like every 6, 7, 8 months with some idea. He wants to start a business.
Yeah.
Because
that's
work, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So maybe the exit strategy is a little too early because I think he's that part of it, the engineering and just
yeah. So that's exactly the point of this conversation was like, hey, not everyone has to go quit their jobs and start a company, and your life is now like sucked up into this thing that you don't want to do a business on. There are other avenues, and so a 1 million exit is not a bad thing. It's just a 1 million exit. You do that 10 times with ideas that you keep getting. That's not a bad place to be in. And $100 million exit is not a bad thing, and it comes with other problems like you have to learn how to run a company if that's what you want to do. And the point, I think, ultimately, and I think we're running out of time also, is to me it's always been about entrepreneurs want to solve a problem, and we're so focused on getting to market and solving this problem that we owe our future selves, our investors, and all the people that believe in our company to do our due diligence upfront. Like, we got to take care of the IP, we got to take care of the design, we got to take care of how we approach the market. And so this is why this is the first meeting of our series on how to start a medical startup. And so thank you for wisdom and insight. And Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, great. Yeah, thanks, Sarma. You're spot on, and Gracie, Alberto. We just really appreciate your time today and kind of illuminating this IP pathway. So if you have any questions for the speakers, you can email us at houston@sopenet, SOPEnet.org, and we'll pass those along to get the answers to your questions. You'll also be invited to attend kind of our upcoming events, including networking event with the speakers, and we'll pass that information along as well. But I think, really, really insightful conversation today. And I think a lot of important considerations as we all kind of consider how we may impact the state of healthcare and where we can provide.
And Alberto and Gracie, like Sarah, are we sharing their email addresses like online or something where we post the video?
Yeah, let's do that. And also we can send a little email to the attendees as well with some additional information.
Cool, perfect. Well, live long and prosper. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.